Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I rise this afternoon to make my contributions to Budget 2022, first of all, permit me to express New Year's greetings to all members of this Honorable House and all Guyanese. I trust that this year will continue to be one that we encourage each other in this Honorable House to be of fairness and in impartiality. Mr. Speaker, before I commence my actual contribution to Budget 2022, I want to respond to a few things said before by a few of speakers who spoke before me. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister Onij Waldron, in her presentation, was very proud to condemn what she called corrupt practices and dishonesty by the coalition while in government. I wish to remind the Honorable Minister that it was her who sat here in this National Assembly and held a holy book to swear in contradiction of our constitutional mandate. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, it was the same APNU AFC who kept the honorable member as a public servant to work for the government, and in her doing so, stymied the work of the coalition while as a public servant. Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Minister Teixeira.
Sorry, under 40, standing order 40. Mr. Speaker, the member is imputing on the image and the reputation of the member, which is totally in order in this House. The reading of the Bible has nothing to do with what is being said. The member is out of order, sir, and he should be warned about it.
Honorable member, I'm sure you're crafty enough to be able to say what you want to say in more parliamentary language.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am, like all other members of this Honorable House, is guided by you. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2022 presented under the theme Steadfast Against All Challenges, Resolute in Building One Guyana, had much promise and expectations from the people of Guyana, coming against myriad of problems outlined by the Honorable Minister, Senior Minister that is, within the Office of the President, with responsibility for finance. Foremost amongst these problems are COVID-19 and the discomfort associated with the numerous variants, not only in Guyana, but globally. Secondly, rising food prices and the inflationary pressure associated with the rise in food prices that render some households impotent in their capacity to make ends meet and to provide a basic meal for families. Mr. Speaker, it is with this in mind that I call on the government to consider, more importantly, measures that will see the working class having more disposable income to cater for their every needs. Mr. Speaker, it is by no accident that the citizens of this country look forward with much anticipation in Budget 2022. I can tell because after the reading of the budget, meeting with some members who I consider to be ordinary working class people. They are disappointed that budget 2022 lacks the vision as the ordinary man sees it. It may have vision, as some of my colleagues on the other side of this National Assembly has so much posited. But the question is it really beneficial to the working class? And those are the Guyanese. Those are the ones we must be responsible for meeting, answering their questions. Mr. Speaker, I wish to turn my attention to education at the regional level. First of all, the Goal Initiative is no doubt a program that we should welcome and must be commendable. What is not commendable, though, Mr. Speaker, is the manner in which the implementation and the application process is being done. The discriminatory nature, that is what we are against. And so we call on the ministry to ensure that things are put in place and that persons are given the equal opportunity, as the government would boldly say, one Guyana. If we continue on a discriminatory nature, then we are not promoting one Guyana. And certainly the people of the indigenous regions are at a disadvantage. Mr. Speaker, since you mentioned about the 1,000 or the 2,000, I will address the issue immediately. Mr. Speaker, this government boasts. In 2021, the Honorable Minister of Finance claimed that the government expended a total of $115.6 million towards the training of 420 community service officers. This figure represents an approximate total of $275,238 for each individual trained. Mr. Speaker, the same minister, notwithstanding the increases in cost of transportation and other factors, is proposing to this very House that the government will be training a further 650 CSOs for a cost of $60 million or $92,300 for every individual. Items 4.195 and 4.196 of the budget clearly speak to that. The expectation was that there would have been a light at the end of the tunnel, but we question, how can you be budgeting less to train more when we should be budgeting more to train more? And so, Mr. Speaker, we question what exactly is being done to our indigenous brothers and sisters. I also recognize, Mr. Speaker, that computers and tablets will be given to teachers, students in schools. The question is, these pre-downloaded devices, how effective will that be when almost all homes in remote regions of Guyana lack electricity and, of course, internet access? Mr. Speaker, this administration boasts about ICT, but yet we are to witness a much needed change in the technologically disadvantaged communities in Guyana. I call on this government to effectively monitor the implementations of policies in the remote areas. I am not condemning the policies outlined in the budget. I am saying that the policies do not effectively address the needs of those who are at a disadvantage. And here I'm speaking of our indigenous communities. I trust that the Minister of Amerindian Affairs will try to convince us otherwise when her time comes to speak. Mr. Speaker, since this government again boasts about their love for the CSO program, it was the AP and UAFC coalition that increased the stipend for the CSOs from 20,000 to 30,000 while in government. 3 budgets after, this present administration failed to increase it by $5. And yet you claim your love for the people of the indigenous people, that is, of Guyana. I call on the ministry and my honorable member, Pauline Sukai, the honorable member, to quickly address this much needed issue. I know that the two shows has also been calling for an increase in their stipend. Imagine two shows who have to supervise the CSOs having the same stipend equivalent to the CSOs. Mr. Speaker, this is the biggest budget when oil is the much talk. Oil is what everybody is talking about. In the honorable member's pronunciation, oil, the honorable member Darmalal, oil. And yet, you can't seem to increase these hard-working indigenous brothers and sisters stipend. That's not good. Mr. Speaker, the expectation was that there would have been some sort of relief as the Guyanese people look forward to what we call the biggest budget. Mr. Speaker, having sat in this house for almost 5 hours listening to the Honorable Minister with responsibility for finance in the office of the President, I don't know why they just name him the minister and done, or the assistant to the real minister. Dr. Ashley Singh, the honorable member, as outlining the government's plan and program for fiscal year 2022, I am amused at the aloofness and contempt for the small working class exhibited in this government's approaches, especially at a time when cost of living and difficulties in attaining basic needs is rampant. Mr. Speaker, it goes without saying that if the people have a problem, we in this honorable house, as representatives of the people, should find a solution to the people's problem. And that is what we need to do. Having said this, I call on the government to consider at least a 10% increase in the salaries of all public servants. All public servants. I don't wish to remind my fellow teachers about the Ministry of Education and its laziness in actually engaging the GTU to address this salary issue. Mr. Speaker, this brings me to a number of questions I would like to ask the government. Is this government serious about progress? Is this government serious about real development? But even more fundamental, Mr. Speaker, is this the caring government that we have been bombarded on by the media and in the media? I would like to believe so, but the evidence does not convince me. Mr. Speaker, indigenous and hinterland development. I wish to turn my attention to health. Last year, we called on the government to make provisions for improved access to health care. Well, I'm pleased this year to say that after my request last year, Imbatir will now have a health hub for the first time in the history of the community. While you were there for 23 years and you did not do it, and you expect the coalition to do it in 3-4 years? So you're doing it now, Mr. Speaker, after 28 years, is obviously welcoming. But before, Mr. Speaker, before I go on, I want to touch a little bit on what is happening in the region. Mr. Speaker, the Mabroma Hospital is being upgraded to what we call a smart facility. I'm speaking to patients just last week. I heard remarks that I can't go there, but I don't want to go there, and a lot of people don't want to go there because it is smart in the sense that the services is not smart. The people who work there are smart. They're the ones who are being smart. Because you go there and you got to spend all day and you cannot access friendly service. So the question is, where is the smartness? This is what we call a failing competence. I'm not blaming central government here. I'm not blaming you on the opposite side here. But I'm blaming you for your non-intervention in actually addressing the issue in the region. That is what I'm blaming you for.
Honorable member, please how you blame me, but I want to give you 5 minutes if someone will move a motion.
Speaker, I so move that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you very much, honorable member. Please again, look who you're blaming, right?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
But I have to address the honorable members through you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the much talk about COVID pandemic and the management in the region. I recognized recently that the Honorable Minister of Health was on record to say that people fetching dead relatives is not true. I want to remind the Honorable Minister of Health that in a previous article, he apologized to the families after fetching the dead child. So how can the Honorable Minister contradict himself and say it's not happening and it's not true? It is true. The evidence is there. And he has apologized. We welcome the apology anyway. And after that, there were instances where persons were fetching, not the dead relatives at this time, but the casket or the coffin to put the dead relatives in. So, Honorable Mr. Speaker, I want to touch a little bit about another scenario where a patient died after reporting to the Mabroma Regional Smart Hospital with a blood count of 5. The patient was kept there for 2 more days. 5 blood count, Mr. Speaker, that is emergency medevac. And the person eventually died just because of their negligence. Mr. Speaker, Public Works. I wish to thank the government again in their budget for this year for having $25 million budgeted for road works in Matthews Ridge. What I'm not pleased about. That is a community that is engaged in large-scale mining. $25 million, that's a drop in the ocean. What can be done with 25 million for roads in Port Kaituma and Matthews Ridge? I call on it was under the APNU AFC that you could take 30 minutes from Port Kaituma to Matthews Ridge or 45 to Barometer. Go there now, you will take 3 to 4 hours because it's back to the state it was pre-2015. Honorable Minister Darmlal, and you're the Minister of Local Government and Regional Development. Nice words. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I am proposing to the Ministry of Education that provision should be made for ATV for teachers who are living in far-flung communities, just as it's done for the Department of Health and Public Works. The cost for transportation for these teachers are way more than half of their salaries. And provision like those will greatly assist them. So I'm calling on the Honorable Minister to make that intervention. Mr. Speaker, another intervention I wish is for access to internet for teachers who are now on the online CPC training program. The online program is also good. I have a lot of teachers at my school who are on the program. What is not good is that they have no access to the internet and they have to use their own personal data, which is roughly 5,400 weekly. Do the math. And so, when you boast about a policy, you have to look at the disadvantages as well. Don't just boast about your policy, boast about the commitment from the person who are actually engaged in your program. They are making the sacrifices more than you on the government side. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2022, though it may not be the best, there are things which certainly a minority would welcome, and those are the private sector. The private sector will benefit a lot. They'll welcome Budget 2022, as is obviously a repayment for them and their intervention in your campaign strategies before. I want to call on you, though, to actually let Budget 2022 reflect a representation for working class, like all other Guyanese, who, if you go on their Facebook pages, you will recognize that they are not pleased that Budget 2022 has not really met their expectations. Thank you.